to check out if we do the website well enough.
Did it say that it's streaming now or no? No, do you guys see a pop-up saying streaming or?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, sorry to break the flow there. I was going to say, when you're talking about, the integrated both energy and communications, I helped set up for there was a DWeb camp out on the West Coast, I guess a couple of years ago now, for the through the Internet Archive and some other organizers, and I went a little early to help set up the mesh network there. And actually, networking is not really my expertise, but I didn't realize that you can send power over the Ethernet cable, so PoE. So just with one line, it's kind of both the communications and the information, and then also the power as well, just one single cable. Sort of interesting. The other thing...
that's what they were talking about. They were talking about fast charging using so if you look at the grid, there are 3 levels. There's the high voltage, there's the medium voltage, and there's like the household voltage. And they were talking about connecting the middle voltage straight to the traffic. And I actually see that if you look at the website, so they have electrical cars and trucks, and then if medium voltage fast charging. And it's the first time I see that. It looks a little bit like a tram, like funny. I never saw that before. Yeah, if you scroll a bit further, you got the big battery thing, and then next to the car, the next one is gonna. So that's with the buses.
I clicked something.
Yes, you've clicked on the car. That's with the buses we've talked about today.
These. Oh, medium voltage fast charging. Interesting.
Yeah, it looks. I didn't know how it looked. That's new to me. It's fun. Had my first partner talks. So what I'm going to do is help this consortium to turn into an ecosystem.
I guess that's sort of when you joined us last, we touched on, or I forget what you had said, but we talked a little bit about ecosystems or niches. But I don't know. Do you see that metaphor sort of? Because I don't really have a deep biological background. Like, I think a lot of these online communities and networks like to think of themselves through that metaphor, but maybe they're not really applying all the insights there are.
For me, it's more than a metaphor. You can actually see in these digital communities the attempts of the origin of life. So what I see is that you can learn about the system dynamics behind the origin of life by looking at what life is trying to emerge at this moment. And so I've seen one community compared to the other community, and one just grows exponential, but there's no interconnectivity, and so they break out. It's called forking. So the community grows too much, and then it forks because there are 2 opposites that don't coordinate well enough, so they start splitting up in different communities. So, but it's when there's this interesting culture that entwines them that you get deeper. So that's what I like about this ecosystem dynamics.
A culture of entwinement.
It's embodiment, actually. So you see the embodiment deploying, but it's you have an idea. That idea is propagating in the community, and then if the community adopts the culture that's behind the idea, that it becomes embodied. I'll give a concrete example. So when I interviewed the ecosystem, there were 2 policies playing. The one was called community first. The other was called, I called community first. The other one was called community contribution. Community contribution is well known in the open source world. So it's basically 10% of the time they can spend on whatever project they want. So it's to allow the developers to be part of a community. But the thing that was extra was a community first, which was a culture that existed in between the entrepreneurs of the ecosystem, but it was not something I've noticed in different communities. And I've noticed that those different communities weren't capable of creating the ecosystem dynamics. So it turns out you need that policy, that part in your culture to grow into an ecosystem dynamic. And so then you can start designing it well or creating it.
Sorry, I'm sorry coming late and missing it, but community first. Tell me a few words about that, please.
Yeah. So it's just a name I gave to it because I've interviewed all of them, and I've noticed that they had this policy of community first. So what they understood is that they live in a fragile ecosystem, and they knew that their actions as a startup had an impact on the ecosystem. So they knew that they couldn't just do whatever they wanted that was best for their company, because if their actions would actually create tragedy of the commons, then it would be the ecosystem would die, the community would die. So they knew they were too big to that they needed this responsibility. But they didn't really agree on it. So they just had that culture that if there is a decision and it's bad for the company or it's bad for the community, they would take the hit and don't give the hit to the community. Because in their mindset, it was this, that they said, like, if my company fails, I can start a new company. If my ecosystem fails, I need to learn to do everything again in a different ecosystem, in a different market. So they didn't want that at all. It's the lesser of two evils. But because of all of them were following that rule, it created a feedback structure. If you go into system dynamics, there is something called the dissipative system. So I saw how the innovation, the open innovation in the community was the consequence of a dissipative system based on those two rules. But you see that then at a certain moment that the corporates come in, the community first rule breaks, while the community contribution rule stays. And so what happened is that it becomes a barren landscape. There was still a valid market, but there wasn't any innovation anymore. So as a community, they weren't like enriching, growing, but as a market, they were earning. So that's interesting dynamics. So you can.
Yeah, no, thank you. That clarifies nicely. Yep.
I've tried to actually explain it in this video. How digital wolves change digital rivers. That's the title.
Ah, that was the one I was trying to. I think you mentioned it last. I was saying at the beginning of the call when it was just Mixel and I that I had watched one of his videos, but I was trying to recall the one he recommended to us.
Yeah.
I watched about 4 or 5 of them. Very good.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, really. It's fascinating to see. Sort of, I call it intelligent thinking. Should I say that? Huh? You know, there's an awful lot of unintelligent thinking out there. There's an awful lot of reaction to conventional, to staying in the bucket, to trying to change things that are not changeable. They don't actually have any possibility. But when you get into the thermodynamics of the situation, it gets quite interesting.
Reminds me, something I've talked a lot about in Clubhouse is the thermodynamics of, so you know the thermodynamics of convection cells? Yep. There's actually one case of advanced convection cells. And I kind of shared it somewhere on my Twitter. So you have if you look at the convection cell from the top, it looks like a honey cube grid.
Mm-hmm.
But there is this advanced case where they heated the side, and depending on the temperature they put on the side of the disk, there's going to be another pattern emerging inside. So you have a direct cybernetic relation to thermodynamics. And I had something like, I mean, if this can just self-organize and this pattern can emerge, the only next thing to actually get brain-like behavior is making that pattern produce a kind of beneficial action, and the game starts. So, but I was surprised that talking a lot of people in Clubhouse, which is mostly like in the States, they didn't know about that research at all. It's like, so I guess it didn't happen in the States.
There's a lot of things don't happen in the States.
Yeah, but somehow if it's not there, then they simply don't have a clue about it. It's crazy how much it's a bubble. The academic world, I mean.
Yeah, bubbles exist very strongly. I put a link in the text chat that I think speaks into this area. I don't know if you're familiar with this concept.
Underwear hair. Okay. Oh, Henri Poincaré, I like him.
He's dead.
I know, but I mean, you know, I'm gonna keep on calling it this. There's like the Brussels interpretation of quantum, and it's pretty different from the Copenhagen interpretation. But it doesn't exist. It's my invention, right?
Okay.
But it's Henri Poincaré, who was a professor at the University of Brussels, so the French-speaking part, and then later on Ilyas Prigogine.
Okay.
And both of them have actually their way of taking up the dynamics. They come to a very different way of interpreting quantum, and it aligns a lot with the work of David Bohm.
Mm-hmm.
And he's finally getting recognized. Finally, it only took them 70 years to reinstate them. I didn't know that Oppenheimer played a very dirty game in trying to get him out of the picture. That was a surprise to me.
Why? Why would that be a surprise? Come
because
on.
I knew what he has done during the Manhattan Project.
Yeah.
He actually, during the Manhattan Project, he actually stimulated the underdog, and David Bohm was one of his PhD students. But there's this paper in 1952, and it turned out that Oppenheimer really tried to kill it. And because they couldn't kill it, they decided to not mention it. Yeah. I was disgusted when I figured that out. I mean, that's...
Well, Oppenheimer had a similar issue with Richard Feynman and Freeman Dyson. He basically resisted their input for an awful long time. And
sorry, Michael, but today someone actually told me like we need to go from egos to ecos.
Yeah, yeah.
You reminded me. Like,
yeah, Oppenheimer was not a team player. He was. Anyway, yeah. The reason I brought up that donut from the coconut thing, this is I heard Jordan Hall talking about convection cells in coffee cream. You know how it all comes up. And he says that's the thermodynamics. That's because essentially a force which is stuck will twist its way out and create spiral processes. And the business of combing a coconut, for instance, combing a coconut, it will always have a tuft at each end, right? Because on that space, it's going to polarize. Now, if you take those two poles and invert them into the toroid, then you have completion. And I think what's happening in our society at the moment is that we've reached the tufts. We've come to the end of a sort of a linear, extractive, egocentric economy.
Yeah.
And it's gonna have to invert into itself to create the toroid, because the toroid contains resolution.
There's actually, I'm going to share that. There's a group in the Netherlands who went from a donut to a trefold. Do you know trefold? And I was surprised because there was also the front image of a book called The Aquarius Conspiracy. So I was a little bit surprised to see that popping up at the same time in different angles. Wait a minute.
I'm waiting for this.
Yeah, it's in Dutch, but I think it's going to be well enough to understand it. So because what I realized is that when he was describing this trefold, not to explain the why, how, what, how we bootstrap knowledge, I was surprised that he was capable of describing the same system of novelty. So I have this system of creation. That's my work that I'm focused on, but there are 4 dimensions, but he's capable of actually turning 1 dimension into a 3-dimensional trefold and then show the flow that way. So that was fascinating.
A trifold. Oh, that, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, all right. Yes, well, that's exactly, this thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same issue of triples.
Sorry,
triples
can you show it again? Michael, I wasn't watching it. I was watching the screen. So what is that?
It's tensegrity. It's minimal thrust and tension. You can see it on anything Buckminster Fuller talked about. It's the building block of the universe, is that a physical object must resist compression and pulling apart. So it must be held together and it must be kept apart. And this is the element of it. As you can probably see, it's
that's
actually
fascinating. How does it called? I mean, you're triggering me like crazy.
Tensegrity. Tensegrity. It's a simple concept, and it's based upon vortices. You see that's a vortex?
Yes.
And if you come through the middle and come out the other side, of course, it's the vortex is in the other direction. So it's, tensegrity. Very nice, yeah.
Fascinating.
And 3 is always more interesting than 2. You were on that what's his name, Dave Snowden call yesterday? Were you, Robert? Did you catch that? No, you missed it. I missed a half of it because I was listening to Howard Rheingold. But anyway, David Snowden, Cognitive Edge.
This is crazy.
He was talking about how every transaction is basically a 3-part process, and it doesn't matter who the 3rd part is. That a mesh is really just a bunch of triangles. I trade with Graziano. Graziano trades with Robert. Who is, we've gone into a 3, and a threesome is circular and allows for progressive accumulation. It works for all, whereas a 2-fold gets into a contention and a problem. So, but all economies are basically collections of triples. Everything is a triple. It's just the 3rd party in the triple you may not know anything about. So I do a deal with you. You do a deal with somebody else anywhere on the planet. It makes no difference. It's still part of a potential triple connection.
Yes.
But the question not just of potential connections, but actually how you do them. You've been working with Michel Bauwens, I think, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah,
we are good.
Has he ever mentioned me?
He's mentioning a lot of people, and all the time he's connecting me with more people. And never seems to end. So probably he will have, probably I will not have remembered because I'm bad at names.
No, it's okay. I just wondering because I think Michelle and I got into some pretty strong contentions about the nature of money, society, change, all this sort of stuff. And he went to blockchain. He went blockchain on all sorts of stuff. And I said that I thought it was really a mistake. I'll put a link in here which shows you what I sent him.
I'm still much focused on the tensegrity.
Oh yeah, tensegrity.
Tensegrity. If you look at the rest of the website of the column, we're talking about tetralogic, and I mean there's clearly tetralogic dynamics in it as well. So it's fascinating how the topology kind of pops up all the and you were talking about Hamani Poincaré. He's also kind of much in topology. I didn't yet fully understand it, so I'm fascinated by it. What's the connection there? So sorry.
Yeah, I think not fully understanding is a life situation. I was in physics until I found out I didn't fully understand it, and then I was in computing, and then engineering, and business, and psychology, and a bunch of other things. And I found that never understanding what you're doing is a very good position. Start from curiosity and question, and that works out a lot better. I found the tensegrity stuff about 50 years ago, and it was a significant change in my thinking systems. You see structure differently when you see it in terms of the internal forces that hold it together, and it leads to a better analysis of almost all mechanical and indeed cyclic systems. And any system that's around is cyclic. If it ain't cyclic, it isn't around.
Okay. I'm, by the way, watching the document you just sent about good money.
Good money. Which one's that? The Lynn Twist one or what?
The one you just shared, or did I get it wrong?
Oh, the document. Yeah, the document. I like the form. Yeah. Michel was saying, and this was 4 or 5 years ago, that he was disappointed in community currencies. They were not working. We met at a conference in Canada where he and a bunch of people came over to Whistler, Arthur Brock and a bunch of others, to have a big think tank about money. Went on for 4 days. It cost about $250,000, which was paid by an Australian insurance company. And the only thing we didn't talk about the whole time the conference was on was about money, really. And certainly we're not talking about the internal consequences of the conference. Now, after that, I had a correspondence with Michel for a year or so. I was trying to explain to him what had gone wrong in community currencies over the 80s, 90s, and beginnings of 2000. His feeling was, however, too bad, it's all gone, go crypto. Crypto has more juice. And I was trying to explain to him that crypto has lots of speculative interest, but it will do nothing socially that has any value that I can think of. I haven't found a single, I mean, blockchain for title, for NFTs, for things like that, sure. But blockchain is money? Come on, nonsense, utter crap. And this paper, this document, this email that I sent to Michel was basically the last time I heard from him. Yeah. C'est la vie.
Yeah.
But from what I can see of your work, you're entirely consistent with the structure and ethics and design of open money.
I wouldn't be able to say because I don't know open money that well.
It's easy. Promissory networks. It's mutual. It's called, people usually talk about mutual credit. I've given up with the term mutual credit because I think it's become discredited by some very bad definitions and implementations. So we talk about mutual commitment. It emphasizes the promissory component, which is what makes it work. But it's basically a closed loop. I started in electrical engineering, so well, one of the places I started. So the idea of oscillators in some form of resonant cavity, the thermodynamics of a closed cavity. And if you have a money which is enclosed in that form, but not enclosed by a boundary, not by a box, it's enclosed by its vitality of interconnectivity. It's an internal energy. Not a restriction. I mean, it's a difference between money as a measure, an information tool with many dimensions, or money as a commodity in limited supply that we compete for.
Sorry, say it again. A commodity in limited supply that we can
compete for. We compete for something in limited supply. You get a Pareto effect, right? You know, if something is useful, then I want more of it so that I get more power in the game. So basically, with conventional money, we get a power curve where the people who have a lot have control, the people who don't are poor.
Yeah, you know? Until someone breaks the system, of course.
Yeah. So the concept of open money is you need never be short of money if you're responsible for your own promissory ability. I can't go on like this because I'm going to bore Graziano and Robert, who've heard it 17 times already, so they don't need to.
No, okay. No, what I'm just, I mean, in a way, I'm extremely pragmatic. So that's I guess the applied science part of me, right? I don't mind how you name it. I want to see it work. And
beer money issued by the pub, beer and bread. Our opinion is that every pub in the country should be issuing money, and the brewers should be the bankers of deepest resort. The Irish bank strike. Do you ever hear of the Irish bank strike in the 70s?
No.
In the 70s, before there was much online banking or anything like that, and there was a crisis in the clearinghouse between the regional banks, which meant that none of the regional banks could verify their balances, their books. So they had to close, which meant that nobody had any, because there was only so much cash in circulation. It was a cash economy in those days. And what happened was the Irish started just writing checks to each other.
Sure.
And yeah,
solve the problem.
Perfect. Yeah. And in fact, it was most effective when the brewers were issuing checks in denominated value, because then they became spendable in every pub, because the pub could spend it on supply.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do now, is basically return to the Irish condition on a global level.
Yes. Yeah, I'm following.
There's the Irish document in there in the chat.
I'm getting more and more this image about scale.
Important. Scaling matters. That's why we want IKEA. IKEA is already embedding itself in the circular economy. It doesn't know it is, because it's only looking at it as a closed loop marketing project to give itself more green points, you know, greenwashing itself. But if IKEA starts using circular money,
yeah, don't ask me why, how, but I'm listening to the case of the Irish bank and how they solve it, and I was thinking about the documentary I saw yesterday about sea piracy, which I knew that the whole fishing industry was fishy, but I didn't know it was that fishy.
what happens offshore, my friend? What happens out of sight? Yeah.
Yeah, I knew those dynamics were somewhere at play, but I didn't know it was this deep, this dark.
Oh, come now. Money goes where it goes, does what it does. It's dark shit. It's bad stuff.
But there you still have that scale problem, right? It's a
scale issue. I don't see it as a problem.
I see it as a
designed for scale.
It's designed for scale, but the problem I see is that if it's just a little bit sinful, it's very sinful.
Well, it's on your point about the community interest or the ecosystem interest. Like, if people are just looking for the sinful benefit, they get their goodies, but it spreads externalities on others. You know, there's a dissipation in that context.
Yeah.
What you need is monies where my benefit is not your loss, where my benefit feeds into a commonwealth of reciprocity and mutual.
But you never really know. That's the whole tragedy of the commons.
Well, it's the things that Graeber talks about happening before we brought in the coinage. You know, the state coinage destroys the conviviality in the community. It's a colonial tool.
Okay, please elaborate.
Okay. When you want to colonize a country or a region or whatever, you come in with armaments first, guns, right? And then you bring in usually germs, and then you come in with money. And it's the money as a dominant factor in creating an import-export market for that group. They suddenly become more interested in import and export. How are we going to buy the ammunition, the oil, the tools, the gimmicks? What do we sell to get it? So the community shifts into being driven by its desire to profit from the environment around it. And it loses the internal patterns and integrity that it used to have from the conviviality of the locality. And the tragedy of the commons is the edge of that. Why should I care about you? I'm doing fine.
But that's not mean. If I see all the time how simply by growth we end up in a situation where something that used to be abundant suddenly becomes scarce.
Yeah.
And we all the time need to wake up to it.
Yeah.
Like waking up to the fact that humanity has become so big a power in the world that it can change the temperature of the world. That's a big power.
Has done. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a big game changer. So, but it's all the time. I mean, that with the fishing industry, it's like waking up to the fact that we actually can really like kill it all, and
Yeah.
and we are doing it, and it's not regulated, and so there is this, but it's all the time. I mean, if you even go back to ancient times, you had a region where people could just live. And then there were too many people in the region, so they couldn't just all of them couldn't just like go hunting in the forest, because then there wouldn't be enough wildlife to go around. So you get the local call them ruler that creates laws that people aren't allowed to hunt in the wild anymore. So you get that structure existed before also, so that they knew that there was a problem, and so they restricted it.
Well, they restricted in terms of privilege and power and opportunity. In England, for instance, the king had the forest.
Mm-hmm.
The forest was the king. You don't go in the forest, I cut your head off. You know, so that's simple. And then his nobles wanted their own forests.
Mm-hmm.
So he granted real estate, royal estate to
Mm-hmm.
the nobles in particular locations. And then for the next 200 or 300 years, there was common land and there was real estate. And when Adam Smith wrote about the free market, he was talking about a land where people could live and be independent. But after Adam Smith, soon after Adam Smith, there were land enclosures all across the United Kingdom. Land became property. People had to pay rent. And what Adam Smith described as a free market was gone at that point. You had to pay to live where you are. It's like you have to pay for air. If you had to pay for air, you don't get any air unless you sign the check, you know, pay the money. And
Isn't that a little bit what happens at the moment?
Yes, getting closer all the time. And
No,
we pay for living.
We've been there forever. We've been there forever. I mean, ever as we had the rulers and how do you say that? Citizens of it, right? Substitute, how do you say it? I don't know it.
Well, subordinates and dominants.
Yeah, subordinates. As soon as you get that kind of structure, you're.
Yeah, me first, and you know, not you. Yeah, it's a simple world, and it's progressively being pushed into a pervasive domination of everything. The market in real estate, the market in technology, the market in entertainment, the market in sports and drugs and sex is all driven by this acquisition without responsibility, because that's what the money makes available. It says that's the game to play. Don't try and be nice with money, you'll lose it. I mean, all the billionaires running in the big leagues at the moment could have financed our way out of the COVID issues, the financial aspects of it, patents, development, propagation, international stuff. You know, 1/10 of Bezos' wealth, or 1/20th of Gates or whatever would have done it. You know, just put together a bit of the money and it would get solved or facilitated, accelerated. But of course, it's not in their interests. They don't care.
I see. For me, that's too much black and white. It's too easy.
Yeah.
It's way too easy. Hi, Joshua.
Yeah.
Mixel, do you know who I am?
Sorry.
It's okay. It's Jimmy Gumdrops from Clubhouse. Good to see you, man.
Oh, good to see you.
Hi, Joshua.
Graziano. Ciao.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt the flow. I just got excited. I saw Mixel on here. I'm like, I know that guy from Clubhouse. All right.
It's been a while that I've been on Clubhouse. I mean, I'm too busy with my new job.
God, you got a
remember.
job?
What would you say is the common topical thread that you were sharing in Clubhouse between the two of you? Or it's a whole variety of different
digital shamanism.
It's kind of interesting. It's the whole Clubhouse made me feel comfortable enough to write an article about the hive mind, which explains also a little bit more my focus as a digital shaman, and it links straight to the whole concept of markets. So I see the switch between digital nomads being in a network, but nomadic, and it links to, if you go to knowledge creation, that's Nonaka's concept. It links to socialization, which is people to people, Then you get the second phase, which is called externalization, which is like groups. And it links to ecosystems, if you see. So it links to tribes, digital tribes and ecosystems.
Yeah.
And then there's a next phase where you see those digital tribes turn into, just call it digital modernity. And you see the ecosystem turning into digital markets. But the thing is that as we make things more explicit, because the switch between socialization and externalization is that your language become explicit. Between externalization and combination, your organization becomes explicit. But as it becomes more explicit, it becomes less humane. It becomes less animated. It becomes less spiritual. So you lose the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And the last phase in the whole Seki model is called internalization. And it's when everything explicit becomes implicit again.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens by embodiment. And so the thing I realized, and the reason I consider myself a digital shaman is because 4 years ago, I had that shamanic experience without doing anything strange. It's just my research on digital transformation got me into a spiritual experience. And people are not ready for the things that's coming, because later on I verified it with ayahuasca. And that's the soft version of the things to come. So people are very scared of ayahuasca. And if it's the very soft version of my first experience, you can kind of imagine what we're waiting for. So, but I think I actually reached the kind of integration part there without really realizing that I was doing it. So it is about the qualia experience of the thing you're creating. So you can reach it with anything that you want. I mean, people go running, call it runner's high. So you can, it's just embodying.
I do Tai Chi.
There you go. Yeah.
So,
it's getting into the flow.
Alexander technique. You know Alexander technique, Mixer?
Alexander technique, no. You know, I'm gonna share my. I wasn't ready yet, but I'm gonna share it. I'm wanting soon enough to ask for people who are interested in helping me edit the damn thing, because I just don't know if it's ready yet. If any here wants to help me edit it, I really appreciate it.
Please.
I think I need to request access, it's saying. And I was curious, and welcome Roland as well. I think Roland was, the two of you been on the call since you were invited each other, I guess?
Sorry that I'm late. Things
Yeah, sorry.
and then I forgot about it even.
I changed it so it's open for all now. So normally if you click the second link, it should work. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was also curious in what you just said, Mixel, you said, I'm curious if this is the model that you said. I heard you say an acronym. I wasn't sure what it was. So this explains it, I guess. Okay. Never mind then.
So the model is called the Seki models. So it's the 4 letters, and it's Nonaka on knowledge creation. It's something pretty Japanese, but I use it in combination with social technology to explain how we are moving to a hive mind. But I've been working way too long on it, and I hope it's a little bit readable. But yeah, well, doing my best. Yeah, it's long.
So we're not all going to pause and read it now?
No, but if anyone actually wants to help me out there, that I would really appreciate it, because I don't know, it makes sense in my head, but linguistic, I can be so lost.
It's okay. It's okay, Mixel. I've been doing this since the 90s. So it's like early 90s when the internet first came out. I come from a background in Ojai with Krishnamurti and spiritual thinking and sacred geometry and chaos math and groupthink. And, you know, okay, I know all of this. Now we got to build it. So we had to build the internet. And then here we are. And when I look at your graphic, it makes perfect sense to me. That top graphic right there. There's the Visa Pisces and the socialization. The externalization is basically you could liken that to an electron, meaning you've got a center and things moving around it, and then you've got things moving. It's vector space, basically homology and vector space.
Yeah, so that's not my model. That's Nonaka. So it's from his paper in 1998.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't see any difference in my own mind, but I'm a crazy person. So you've met me on Clubhouse. I don't see any difference.
What was the name again on Clubhouse? I'm gonna look at
Jimmy. It's Jimmy Gumdrops. So physics, biology, psychology, social thinking, internet protocols, it's all one in my mind. Everything is holistic. It's all nodes. We're all nodes on this spiritual thing we call life. I don't, you can sit and dissect it and turn it into holograms or non-hierarchical structures or whatever you want to do. But in the end, we all have to be quiet, listen, and then speak and be quiet. And those are interrupt signals on the internet. Same thing with all of biology, you know. The cell has to just listen to the other cells, incorporate each other, or work together, or try to take over and be a cancer. You know, it's up to the cells. They can figure out what they want, how they want to copy and replicate and fold. And with that, I'm done being esoteric, and it's so good to see you guys. I don't know. I came here, Robert, because I was on Otter. I was just with a client, and I finished my Otter recording, and it said live MetaCAugs. I go, oh shit, I'm late. So thanks for posting that to Otter AI. That was awesome.
Well, for context, I was explaining to Mixel before I started recording and streaming that we do record and stream, but it doesn't really go out to the, say, public internet immediately. It goes to a sort of unlisted stream that's mostly just shared with us. But yeah, I've sort of piped in the audio, including my own, into Otter AI, though. So if anybody, I don't know, the intention was that, oh, maybe we could sort of, if we missed something or we wanted to go back or we'd rather not type things out, we could sort of copy and paste words from here into our sort of shared note-taking space or something like that. But yeah, I can share the link again. I don't know, some of these experiments, I don't really get taken up on. It's more just, some of it's just me goofing around and others watching or something. But yeah, I'll share the link there.
So by the way, if it's sent live and we Twitter the thing, people can just enter, or you don't want that?
Well, we've toyed with the idea of replicating a sort of Clubhouse thing, though we obviously don't have the sort of social networks just sort of behind our back at any moment. But yeah, it would require sort of sharing the Zoom link. But yeah, we could, I guess sharing the Zoom link would somewhat be the equivalent of sort of inviting somebody to the stage or something like that. But yeah. Yeah, it is an open, well, both an sort of formulated as an open space technology style conversation where really we can sort of, although we haven't really broken out into breakout rooms in a while, we just sort of go where the one stream of conversation goes. But yeah, we're totally open here to sort of inviting friends and others to join in. Although it is more, I'd say, on the sort of emerging community side than just a, hey, whoever shows up on the open internet sort of side of things. But yeah.
But it's fun to play with the synchronicity stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff is happening a lot on the Clubhouse. That's one of the things I like most about it. It's so you come for the medium and you stay for the people.
Yeah, and I'm noticing their algorithms. I'm calling it an algorithmic conspiracy because their algorithms have changed drastically in the last couple of weeks, and they just did an update to it. So now it's you think you're just randomly in rooms with people, but it's pinging and signaling, and it's really getting better. I don't know. Well, worse for me, but better for Clubhouse. So
That's often the case with social media. It's worse for you, but better for them.
Yeah, I'll just, I know you're on there, Roland, is if someone pings you into a room and then they make you a moderator, it'll automatically ping your friends in there because you're now a moderator and you're on stage speaking.
Yes.
So I didn't even look at the name of the room. I thought it was a friend pinging me in to speak one-on-one. And he was with a group of 5 people and they wanted to talk about race relations. And now all my friends are being pinged in to talk about race relations. And I didn't want to signal that. I don't want to talk about race relations. So you got to be careful on that app. If someone makes you a moderator, move yourself to an audience and then come back on stage and take away that moderator, because that's a little trick that they use to ping you in.
No, for those that showed up a little late, an earlier piece of the conversation, Mixel was telling us about, well, I had called it a metaphor, this idea of ecosystems. Maybe I'm sure some of these social media platforms would like to turn into a full-fledged, say, ecosystem or something. But the idea of, well, you had brought up this concept of tragedy of the commons, and what you said about community first made me think of some approaches, say with commons-based peer production, obviously replacing community with the word commons, that, yeah, if we're all sort of working towards the commons, and I guess I'm curious, maybe from looking deeper in like you said, it's not a metaphor, it's maybe reality in many ways. What do ecosystems have to teach us about? Oh, interesting. There's a numbered person who's joined.
Just so you know, I tweeted it. So
okay. Okay.
I love it. Mixel, I love you, man. I'm glad that I see your face here. How did you find MetaCAugs?
Oh, Ronald.
Yeah.
He's
all right.
We met in Clubhouse.
Very nice.
It's the Dutch connection.
I figured you guys would find each other. That's why I didn't invite you. I just figured you'll find your way in here.
I'm still reading the Cultivating the Hive Mind.
I do like the Dutch connection. I do like that, Roland.
Was that something you shared today, Mixel, or this is something else, the Cultivating the Hive Mind?
It's something I haven't shared yet. I mean, so I want to publish it on my Medium, and normally I try to have an article once a month, but I've spent way too much time trying to get this one ready. So it was intended for May, but I don't have anything in May, so it's going to be the one for June.
Please say you publish elsewhere as well.
So I do have I've got Dutch things, but I stopped doing that because the too little people interested. But I have my Medium site. Wait.
Oh, I meant in addition to Medium, because I don't know, I wind up not being able to read anything on there because I don't pay to subscribe, and it seems now almost everything has a paywall on there. When I at least go try and read it. But
it should be. Can you check it, because it should be totally visible to anyone? I mean, I hate paywalls.
I'll try. Do you have a quick link, or I can go search for it? Yeah, I put up this idea of posse of from IndieWeb of sort of publish once but syndicate elsewhere. Ideally, you'd be publishing on a sort of medium or space of your own. Let's see.
Yeah, I need to change my website to actually get it there. But I mean, the Medium seems to be working well enough.
Okay, well, so far so good. I don't know. Maybe I'm not a good Medium.
I've always had a little bit of help with someone willing to edit, so that was
Maybe you have, I think Roland, because he explained to us the sort of differences between Medium and Stack, or wait, what is it called? Substack, in terms of journalists and recent sort of trends in that world of your choice between a sort of subscription based or otherwise. But maybe it depends on how you configure your Medium, that you can have it be totally open, or maybe you opt in for some sort of monetization or something. But yeah, it looks good on my end. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to voice my frustration. Medium was just a place for all the computer programmers to program and share, and then it turned like public, like Facebook, and everyone started using it. And for me, it lost its credibility when anyone. Same thing with Huffington Post. It used to be you had to be on the Huffington Post, and they started letting anyone publish at Huffington Post. So yeah, Medium drives me crazy. I don't use it. I just tried to click the link and it says sign in with Google, and yeah, I don't want that. I prefer WordPress, like open.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't publish there. It's a great place to publish. It's a good community and it's built up. It's fantastic because it looks official, but anyone can post something that looks official on Medium and build a little reputation there and Reddit and Substack, and all of a sudden you're getting calls from Fox News and you're on Fox News. Yeah.
But I have that issue a lot with YouTube. I mean, as soon as they start monetizing on people who don't want to monetize, that's a bridge too far for me. And I wish I could get out, but I feel pretty locked in there. So I didn't see any other video site I could actually.
Have you used Vimeo?
Yes, I have, but somehow I keep sticking to YouTube.
It's
Which
the
is different.
second largest search engine in the world. So why would not be on there? It makes perfect sense.
But I hate it now because it's. I mean, if you go back to YouTube in the early days, it was really content generated, and then the whole fuss with the music industry turned it in something terrible.
Yeah. It's also, YouTube is different in different countries. So there's very, very different depending what country you're in.
But now they monetize everything, right? Because I didn't mind that you had like the ones that did monetize and that the ones that don't monetize, and I understand that's still so with Medium, but I guess I would drop out as soon as they start doing that.
Yeah, everything is monetized. Even, GitHub is bought by Microsoft, bought it, and it's open right now, just like Open AI was open and then they closed it. So they'll be closing GitHub in the next couple of years.
I call that the tragedy of the digital commons, and that's exactly what I witnessed when. So I was part of this community called Ruby between 2006 and 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And until 2012, I was actually allowed to be part of meetings and collaborate. But then suddenly there was this artificial scarcity. You had to be in the inside. And so that kind of stopped my research because I was doing participating research, but that kind of closed all the doors. And there is this at a certain moment, it's getting monetized. And for me, that's the tragedy of the digital commons.
Yeah, I think at some point everything got monetized, and anything that wasn't monetized got the moniker of the dark web. They started calling it the dark web.
Sorry about that. That's your tweets brought in 2 Zoom bombers.
There's the dark web.
Was that the dark web and intervening?
Woo! Okay, right on cue. Right when I said it, there it was. There's the internet. Yeah, nice job, Mixel. All right. Woo! Woo, that was painful in my ear. I had both
Wow.
headphones
So
on.
those are like trolls, right?
Yeah, that's the problem with sharing raw Zoom links on Twitter is people are just trolling, well, literally trolling in a sort of phishing sense that we referenced earlier to find Zoom links and come disturb people.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna kill remove the Twitter.
It's
you.
fine. I actually turned on the waiting room so they don't just flood in immediately. I've had experiences with this. Actually, Ward Cunningham, who uses my Zoom room every Wednesday to discuss federated wiki, I've lent him the Zoom room, and he likes to tweet out about it, to open to anyone to show up and talk about wikis or anything related, federated wiki demo technology.
Because he is so desperate that.
Oh, well, he's probably one of the first people that discovered what happens when you open a website up to whatever people on the internet want to say or add or edit or but yeah. Anyways.
Nice job, Robert.
Yeah. Actually, we were talking about comment. I'm curious. We mentioned Michelle Bowens a little earlier in the peer-to-peer foundation and this idea of tragedy of the commons, but is there, I don't know, I'm curious if anyone here feels there's a sort of, maybe not a solution to that problem. I've thought sometimes, maybe you do simply by your choice of, I don't know, licensing, you can somehow avoid having somebody step into your space and just sort of,
Well, I'm trying to explain a little bit in the hive mind that I think that probably the solution is going to be getting way more integrated. It's a little bit like people don't mind that we kill dolphins for tuna because we don't know. But if you would like get confronted with every bite you make with the misery it has created, it would quickly stop. And I think that this is what nature is going to do to us, basically, force us to integrate in such a deep way that we are not capable of doing harm. But it's what I'm trying to understand from my shamanic work and my experience as a digital shaman, but trying to figure out how that integrates all. So that's the last phase when it embodies the internalization. You kind of embody it. And so if it's on a very personal level, it's a mind switch. But if it's on a group level, it's actually a cultural thing. So, but what's it going to be when it's on a combined thing? That's going to be interesting. So I actually tried an attempt because I think that, well, yeah, you can read it.
Actually, that landed, because the way I was thinking was, yeah, maybe went back when it was the prairies, or I forget how it's normally contextualized as the traditional commons. Yeah, there'd be no way to not feel the pain or whatever if somebody came on and just killed all the animals or took all the land or something like that, where these days where maybe money or digital things are so far abstracted, yeah, we don't feel the same pain in the way because it's so abstracted. But it's interesting. I know actually, I don't know if Charles Blass will join us, but he's shared in a few different contexts the things like Neuralink and these other brain computer interfaces as from us almost a dystopic sort of kind of scary realm. But obviously that would in many ways be the mechanism or interface that would allow us to sort of, I guess, feel the pain of these more highly abstracted digital things. Maybe, I don't know, good or bad, maybe.
Robert, have you guys discussed Google I/O from 2 weeks ago, the Lambda project, conversation technology?
I think you briefly touched on it. I don't know, and I forget. So no, I don't think deeply. But
it's, yeah, the best way to really just type in YouTube talking with a paper airplane, and it's Google I/O talking with a paper airplane. And the idea is that you can talk to any object and have a conversation that's a real conversation with a chair, with the sun, with the earth, with a tree, with a plant, with anything, and it can speak from the perspective of that object. And I think that's going to be a huge game changer in the internet, where you'll have children talking with objects, and whoever's programming that machine learning will be able to take over people's understanding of the world around them. Here, yeah.
Fascinating. But I actually think that that's also happening at the moment, because many of the scandals were already happening. Many of the dirty politics was always the way that they were working, but now it kind of becomes way more visible, and people are only realizing at the moment that they are part of this game. So it didn't react in a way that it actually made a difference, but it's at least, before you can actually solve a problem, you need to become aware of the problem. And I think that awareness is emerging.
Oh, and I think, well, not just relating to brain computer interfaces, but I think what some were worried about is, well, this idea of sort of in some ways it getting away from us, or there's an even deeper bifurcation of humanity between the sort of those who are augmented and those who are not, and just further sort of wealth disparities and inequalities in that way.
Yeah, I think we're in for a wild ride coming up real soon. I saw AWS has the same type of conversational technology, and then databases and programming is now able to be an application that can be put on multiple servers anywhere. In other words, imagine every application you build is contextual depending on who has programmed what API interface and how they interoperate. Not to sound dystopic, but they're creating actual intelligence, meaning actual entities, and our digital twin is the next thing to happen. Is how we program our digital twin and how that interfaces with the internet will be just as relevant as how we, as the actual person, interfaces with the internet. And who gives access, just like we did just now with Zoom, you gave access to the whole world, and then you put a little firewall in front of the Zoom. So now people go into a waiting room. I think our digital twin will be doing the same thing when computers are talking to our AI assistant. If it doesn't have good programming to give it, it'll just fill up with junk, and someone will log into their digital twin and it will just start spitting out like, I hate you, I'm going to kill you. It's like, hey, digital twin, relax. What's going on? Who pissed you off? I do think that's going to happen very, very soon. That's I don't know if anyone here is programming their digital twin, but it's a real thing.
Are you programming your digital twin?
Yeah, I created a separate account on Google to program my life. So I started using it as an assistant about 5 years ago, and her name is Gwen, and that's my digital twin.
And what can she or it do?
She can interface with my clients, and she can help them with their projects.
Okay.
I've known the concept from research in the late 90s, but I haven't yet seen good improvements on it. So I would be actually interested to see how it works these days.
Yes. Me too. I would be very interested.
Maybe to flip back to where we normally start in terms of signal swapping. Does anybody, I'm curious if Roland or others have things that they came across through the week they'd like to sort of put on our radar?
I had my talk with Tim Berners-Lee.
Fantastic.
Yes, it was the first time that I had the opportunity to actually interview him. So that was quite an experience, I must say. It's a very decent and almost humble person, not a kind of a rock star kind of person, not at all. Well, you really feel how the World Wide Web, it's a bit like his child. So we asked him repeatedly whether he still thinks that the web is something which is which makes the world to a better place. And because of course he has all this, he has lots of critique on the web, but because it is his child also, he refuses to say that it's a lost cause or that it's actually evil. So he still believes that it is possible to fix it, to fix the web, and he wants to do that by elaborating on the existing web standards and using a technology which is actually more a kind of a number of specifications enabling you to pass along information, but also enabling people to have data votes where they can decide who controls what of their data. Actually, they are in control of their own data. They can decide who else can share those data, but they keep being the owner of the rights on their own data. And so this is this solid system. And what he did, he created a company called Inrupt. And Inrupt is based in Boston. And there is John Bruce is the CEO of Inrupt. I met him too. And so that's the commercial entity actually trying to promote the solid idea and along the open source community. And so, for instance, they made this enterprise solid server, which is a commercial product. And next to that, there is a professor in Belgium, Ruben Verborg, who is making or helping to make an open source version of that server. And so that's the way it works. And he was in Flanders because the Flemish government wants to implement on a very large scale the solid technology, so that every citizen in Flanders can have her own data vote. And also they want to create what they call a data utility company, which would be like a neutral third party standardizing information flows and enabling people to exchange information, but within the philosophy of solid. So you would have verticals such as, for instance, mobility as a service, or other stuff would be real estate or construction, where you typically have lots of data going back and forth, lots of data, and these days it's pretty bureaucratic and lots of meaningless, senseless work involved. And so that could be rationalized and make far more efficient, while still giving people the opportunity to control their own data or to delegate the control over their own data. And actually, there is also something in it for companies. This is not a kind of a leftist dream which would only appeal to the left-wing specter of the audience. It's actually something which could be interesting for companies wanting to collect information about this, but in this sense that it would be more negotiable. So, for instance, a retailer, a big retailer, could propose something. Say, okay, give me. I know perfectly what you're buying at my place, but I would like to have a broader view of what you're buying at other retailers. And so you could agree or you could allow access to that information or refuse it. But of course, the retailer could also propose something in return. Say, if you give me access, then you will have, I don't know, then you have to pay less, or there will be some other advantage. And then people can just decide whether they want to sell their information or not. Or maybe you could even add extra information and say, you know what, I will not only give you the other retail information, I will also give you access to my health records, and go be very extreme in this. But then, of course, you would want to get far more back in return. So it would be more. There would be a kind of a marketplace for information if I reflect on what they were actually saying. And well, and I get maybe that there will be new kinds of services helping people to find out when it would be interesting to engage in such a information market with their personal data or not, or doing that in their behalf, that you just put some boundaries and principles and say you can never give away these kinds of information, but other stuff, other data vaults I own, you can pretty much do what you want as long as there is a decent return. And then some artificial agent or a real agent could do that. Your digital twin could do that for you, could actually start trading your information. So it's pretty fascinating. It's especially because it is something which is no longer just an academic exercise. It's really something which is being implemented now in Flanders for more than 6 million people, and I know that the National Health Service in Britain is having a look at it and doing some pilot projects, and there are some other places. There is, for instance, also somewhere in Europe, government authorities are experimenting with even very, very sensitive data about domestic abuse and domestic violence, where those data would also be in data vaults, and the people concerned could decide themselves who gets access to that information, like maybe their lawyer or their counselor or I don't know what. Stuff like that. So, and now what they are doing, there is an organization of a kind of a monthly get together called Solid World, and there I think they exchange information about all those experiments. So that was a bit my. So I've been working on that the last 2 weeks, having an interview with the Flemish Prime Minister, who is actually called Minister President in Flanders, and Tim Berners-Lee and his professor also, Ruben Verboek, about this emerging data, personal data market. Robert, a good
That's
signal?
interesting, Roland.
Yeah, actually, I don't know. When you were talking about it, it reminded me I was very inspired by this idea of linked open data.
Yes.
And it also, obviously that's wrapped up in the naming of solid, but it's also, it's social data, but I guess maybe it's not always as open. Although, yeah, it sort of still makes me think back to what Mixel was talking about earlier about community first, in a way of sort of the openness. Maybe it's doesn't imply that it's going for sort of a greater good, but that's maybe my sort of bias to it. Oh, if it's open and we can all use it. But yeah, and also I think sometimes why the sort of tragedy of the commons is, well, sometimes called a myth, is because in some ways Ostrom showed how it doesn't have to be a tragedy. But I guess that gets into the social practices of how we sort of self-regulate ourselves. Although again, it needs to be seen as, it still needs to be protected in the sort of the larger systems around you. I guess your governments and others around you. I don't know. Maybe ultimately, sort of, I don't know where it comes from, with this idea of might makes right or something like that. Not that it's true, but I don't know. We can have our social rules and things we like. I don't know. Ultimately, I don't know. Regulations might not stop bad things from happening, and I guess that's why I'm sort of worried about runaway technologies in a way. Yeah, actually, I was trying to come up for some questions for you, but I forgot to send them to you beforehand. So I don't know what, did you arrive at some, did you seem to land on some questions that maybe seemed novel to Tim Berners-Lee, or sort of questions you were particularly interested in asking?
It was very much about solid, because that's really the thing he is working on right now. Because we could go endlessly about all the stuff going wrong on the web, but that everyone knows already. So this is more about how to do something which would maybe solve not everything, but would be a good way to improve the open the web. And there was this funny part where my colleague asked him whether he was not a bit sad that he never took a patent, intellectual property right on the web. And he said that he talked about the days of Gopher, the communication protocol, and which enabled people to share files, and you had menus, you could go through Gopher and all that. And in the beginning of the 90s, it was really the one of the more sophisticated tools of the internet. And then at a certain moment, people who invented Gopher decided to sell licenses, user licenses. And immediately the traffic on the Gopher service began to diminish. And the people of the Internet Engineering Task Force, they were up in arms, and they asked, they told Tim Berners-Lee that they wanted to get rid of Gopher as soon as possible. And so he realized that going to ask people to pay up for using the web would be rather stupid. And so he says, if you want to collect or organize all the information of the planets, then you cannot ask money for that. And and I said, if I should have tried that, then I would not have this discussion, he told us, because the web would have been a failure. So that's the very paradoxical how something which is almost infinitely valuable, like organizing all the information out there, the same dream as another guy I had the opportunity to speak, the founder of Wikipedia, has exactly the same dream of organizing all the information out there. And both came to the conclusion that you cannot ask money for it. Maybe you can ask for donations, but you cannot you cannot force people to pay for that. And so that's rather impressive, I think, because so many other things you have to pay for, but are far less valuable than Wikipedia or for the World Wide Web.
It makes me think likely the same applies to both Google and Facebook. If they would have said, hey, you have to pay to play here, it probably maybe wouldn't have gotten as big. So I guess both of them found ways around that where, yeah, they, with data collection and advertising, they found a way around it to sell things, sell you, or whichever.
Yeah, because you need you need some money to, and now I know that what Wikipedia is doing, they maybe they have another source of income now, because they want to offer services to companies who want all the information of Wikipedia and everything what changes in Wikipedia. They want a kind of a real-time feed, or maybe weekly feed at least, of organized data, showing them everything what's changing there. And in order to organize that and to have a help desk helping big institutions or corporates to do that, they can offer it as a product and ask money for it, but without charging the users of the civilians, let's say, the ordinary users of Wikipedia would not have to pay for that. But if you really say, I want everything and I want it right now, and it has to be standardized and it has to be real time, well, then maybe you should pay for it.
Something about calling it, what did you call it? A data utility?
Yes, the data utility company.
Because we started the call, Mixel was talking about grids. So I'm wondering, is what you said is happening in Brussels relating to this being a sort of public utility in a way, or it's not really?
Yeah, it is. Level? It is explicitly the Prime Minister, the Minister President is he refers to utilities like water, for instance, or electricity, where you have the electricity company, which often in Flanders and in Belgium and in many places in Europe, they're not really commercial entities. They are what they call intercommunes. You have local entities such as cities and villages, and they get together and organize the distribution of water and electricity, etc. And they make a company doing that for them. So it's a kind of a public company, I think. I'm not really very good in. I don't know that sector very well, but anyway, so you have those the utilities like electricity, water, cleaning up the streets, etc., or the basic pipes of the internet, stuff like that. So, and they would want to create the same thing for data, and it has to be a neutral entity. it is not necessarily a state entity. Even in Flanders, they don't want it to be a state entity. The government is actually taking the initiative, but they want to sell. They want to sell the company as soon as possible to private interests, but they have to obey certain protocols. They cannot turn it into. It has to stay a neutral thing. Because you have to imagine you have verticals such as real estate, and you have many competitors in real estate, or companies who are competitors, but they all want to use those data. They are all benefit from using those data. It's like the road, you know, you have people using the road, and they can be competitive truck drivers, but well, they all have an interest in having a well-developed road system. And so it's the same applies for data. And that's also what Europe is been doing right now. They call it data spaces. For instance, health would be a data space, because that's obviously a place where you can exchange lots of information about diseases and all kinds of data which can make people healthier. But at the same time, there is this risk that you would expose people's personal health data, which of course you don't want to do. So you need this kind of neutral party who is, well, taking care that the data can be standardized, that they can be exchanged, that they are anonymized, that people have a say about whether or not to use their data. And that would be also, this is the same idea of having a neutral third party organizing that. And then there would be universities as well as hospitals or pharmaceutical companies. They all would have access to this, to the data. And probably they would have a representation in the company organizing this, so they can, but they would not be representing their own selfish interests, but they would represent the common good of the data utility.
Doesn't really follow, but when you mentioned the same thing earlier, it made me think of Google's little opinion rewards app, where they'll ask you questions about where you've been and what you've bought and things you've done in the world, and you sort of confirm it to them, and then they'll give you some credits on the App Store to buy apps or something like that. Obviously, it's
really.
I wouldn't be sharing my, I don't know, my DNA sequence or my health data or something like that, but obviously that's within their little ecosystem or silo or something.
Well, it depends on what you can get. Maybe you get something very interesting for your DNA sequence.
Maybe some ebooks.
Yeah.
Swap it for some ebooks.
But as long as they, but just imagine, as long as they don't sell your person, say this is the DNA sequence of Robert Best, but they just make it a kind of data input which is not linked to you personally. There's no way to find out that it's actually your sequence. Then why not?
I think, well, then I guess that the danger then is, rather than passwords leaking, that metadata leaks and associations get linked up with other things in a probabilistic way, where maybe they don't know 100% for sure that that's my sequence, but they've got a 98%
high probability
chance.
Yes.
Yeah,
that is
What
my data colleagues are often, maybe not often, but sometimes they experience that you have anonymized data, and still they realize that if they really would want to, they don't want to, of course, but if they would want to, they could sometimes find out really repersonalize the data and say, okay, that person in that village is so specific. If you combine it all, then you could really pinpoint the person and say, okay, this is what we know about you. So I guess Google, could do the same.
In Kenya, M-Pesa was paying people phone money for answering questions. Basically, a translation between Swahili and different languages, because they have, a lot of languages in Africa, and the sort of glossary terminologies between different languages. So you put in a few seconds on your phone typing what is the translation of this world, and you got some phone time. A very effective way of pulling people into that form of data exchange.
There is something else happening within the AI world that I don't know if you guys noticed, that there is this kind of schism at OpenAI. There is another organization now, Anthropic, and that's former OpenAI guys doing their own thing now, because OpenAI developed the GPT-3, the language model, natural language model, which enabled, we played with it here, producing all kinds of funny texts, because it's able to write text which seem to be written by humans. And OpenAI actually is an organization wanting to investigate how to super artificial intelligence to something responsible. So to have ethical super intelligence, actually, or ethical general intelligence. But they ended up selling an exclusive license to Microsoft on GPT-3. And there was quite some tension about that, even though they tried to separate the influence of Microsoft, to seal off a part of OpenAI, which is more involved with the ethical research, in order to avoid any commercial influence on that part of OpenAI. But still, there was a discussion, and a Mr. Dario Amodei, together with who was VP of research, left the company in December, and he started with his sister Daniela their own company, their own little OpenAI called Anthropic. And Anthropic wants to build reliable, interpretable, and steerable AI systems. And but it's also general AI. They really have this ambition of working on something like general AI. And the funny thing is that they did a capital round and got $124 million. And the investors behind it are people such as John Tallinn, who is the co-founder of Skype, but also Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, and Dustin Moskovitz, who is one of the co-founders of Facebook, one of those young guys in their dormitory who were making Facebook together. And he is actually one of the youngest billionaires ever, I believe, together with Mark Zuckerberg. Actually, so all those people are investing in that ethical enterprise, which is a non-profit enterprise. And that's
You do.
so why would they do that? Why would someone like Eric Schmidt and Moskovitz and very tech-savvy people, and I guess especially Eric Schmidt, knowing one or two things about artificial intelligence, they seem
So
to
just-
be worried enough to support financially this AI initiative.
Yeah, well, that's what the Gutenberg made his money on too. He was selling indulgences, people trying to buy some time off the fourth level of bardo of God knows what. I mean, you couldn't be Eric Schmidt. You couldn't even be Bill Gates without feeling a little guilt.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't. I mean, I'm assuming Bill Gates is that human, but
We should ask Hillary, of course, but
well, she's left.
I mean, we should ask Melinda. I mean.
Behind every great man, there stands a complaining woman
Yeah,
or something.
but I'm really curious to know more about their actual projects, whether they too will develop something like GPT-3, because there is even an ethical discussion about building such a thing. They are also really into building those large-scale AI models, but those large-scale AI models, they are consuming enormous amounts of energy. GPT-3 is the amount of energy consumed by a small city, just for that one language model, actually. That is the same discussion, of course, in crypto about Bitcoin and Ethereum is also even consuming even more energy.
I was going to joke and say if we put it on the distributed computer, it will be even more efficient.
Yeah, it consume even more energy.
Or if we make it proof of stake, then there'll be even more sort of winner take all dynamics.
Yes.
Whoever has the most money will control the AI super intelligence.
But you know, actually, I had several years of discussion with oh no, I can't get to his name. The guy from Artificial General Intelligence.
Oh, I know. I'll figure it out. I know who you mean.
He's been part of the research group. He was coming a lot to Brussels in 2004 something. I mean, Ronald, when you were talking about the split between OpenAI and then the new company, oh, I'm getting way too tired, so I probably need to start wrapping up because I can't get the words anymore. That's the first sign that I need to go to sleep. If I can't get to the words, it's game over. But it reminded me of things I saw in other open tech projects.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the forking concept that when a community grows and it gets a lot of interest and there's like a lot of money involved, it really depends on the culture inside the community that it will work or not. So I was thinking about that when you were saying that, but like when you moved on to why are they funding that? There's Ben's my friend. Well, but you know that Ben has this project, and there's some other guys. He actually resonated a lot with two other of my colleagues. One is now called Kabir. There's a strange thing. Almost everyone in our research group changed his name. So I still know him as Victor, but these days he's called Kabir. And he is coordinating the Singularity web. So the Singularity, but it's a GitHub stuff project they are running. And that was a project that he started with Ben a long time ago. But that's also related to artificial general intelligence. But I all the time had this discussion with Ben that you need to do it to prove it. Yeah. And I had a very different take on it. Because the take I took in 2004 to investigate artificial general intelligence is to make it very concrete, is to figure out how to do one creative act, simple creative act. And the thing that came out of it kind of was, it's not a full antithesis, but it's close enough. Because the thing is that on the one hand, the feedback system for creation is very easy. But on the other hand, you just shifted the problem. You didn't solve the problem. The problem was shifted to, it's easy if your agent is complex embodied. So if your agent has a complex embodiment, so so it can actually zoom in to the problem that it's trying to deal with, then solving the problem is actually very easy. It's very doable. But then I realized that that same feedback structure is popping up everywhere. Like one that really struck me was Bruno Latour, who talks about science in action. And in the book in '99, he went a little bit deeper into a design perspective of the things he was doing. And he came up with a concept called the science blood flow, which is the same feedback structure. And there is some work from the research-based view to capabilities, then to a dynamic capability framework, and it's the same feedback structure. So what I was realizing is that there is like a system of creation.
Yes.
So it's a physics, it's a law, and if conditions are right, the system can start becoming creative. I wouldn't say conscious. I later on discovered the link to consciousness, but not at that time.
No.
But my point seems to be that consciousness is basically everywhere. And I'm sharing this view with Don Hoffman. So if there's one person in cognitive science I resonate most with, it's Don Hoffman.
Okay.
And he has a very interesting paper in 2016 called The Evolutionary Case Against Reality, and showing how the hidden Markovian models can actually say something about the illusion of choice, or the illusion of freedom.
The illusion of free will.
Yeah, well, but it's interesting because he actually figured out that so the thing they are doing is they can actually measure from an electromagnetic point when you make a decision, conscious decision. But between the measurements and your experience, there is a gap in time. So they actually already know what your choice is going to be before you know what your choice is going to be. So we can measure that. And focusing into that gap, he comes actually with some interesting mathematics, and still trying to figure out the nitty-gritty of how he got to it. But when he got to it, actually realized that he described the same mathematics as he knew from the free wave particle. And that sets us on a path to, can we actually prove that consciousness can create space-time? And the way we can do that is actually use the models that Don and colleagues have to show simplifications for the scattering amplitude in the particle accelerator. Because then you have just shown that the mathematical models you're working with in the cognitive domain actually simplify the mathematics needing for calculating the scattering amplitude. And that's the thing that's the thing that Einstein learns, right? If you have two things and you cannot separate the one from the other, then they should be the same. So, but then in this case, cognition would be the same as basically the thing we understand. I don't know if it's already the quantum foam, or if there's some other dynamics at hand, but at least a level below the things we understand today. We do know the quantum foam has been proven by looking at the event horizon of black holes, because there was this idea like things popping up in and out of existence at the smallest level. So, but it would be like a matter and antimatter particle, and then they would annihilate each other right away. So that's why. So there was a theory, but then they figured out that they could actually prove that the theory was right by looking at the event horizon, because if those two particles would pop up in existence exactly on the event horizon, they wouldn't be able to fuse again. And that would mean that the black hole radiates. And Hawking's calculated the radiation that we then should expect from black holes. And it turns out that there is this radiation. So kind of proven the whole quantum foam principle. But what I see Don Hoffman is doing is quite related to it. And I've mentioned earlier, like for me, I believe there is like this Brussels interpretation of quantum physics, which is very different to the Copenhagen interpretation. And so in the Copenhagen interpretation, you have that there's this paradox with the observer, but the paradox dissolves if you understand that consciousness is first. So it's okay, complicated, maybe not the best moment now to dive into it, but
it's difficult to get out of it.
What I wanted to say about artificial general intelligence and the link I've made earlier with the hive mind is that as soon as people realize how it's integrating and how awareness is basically creating the embodiment, things will change radically. And as I mentioned, my work kind of made me already plunge into something that is actually pretty dangerous. So I wonder what's going to happen if that's going to happen more often. Because it's like it's mass psychology, and if that's regulated wrongly, you get into mass psychosis. And we do know that mass psychosis doesn't stop until everything is burned. So that's dangerous. There has been villages where all women are killed because the village went into a mass psychosis, thinking that there were witches. Like there are cases like this in Germany. So the challenge there is that if now people are pushed to the edge, and if you read the thing I'm talking about with the experiment in 2011 in Chicago with the hive mind, you kind of start getting that we are getting there, but it's going to be dangerous if we're not prepared of when that happens. But it's a very, very different approach to superintelligence and artificial intelligence, because basically what I'm claiming there is that we are the artificial intelligence. So being afraid of artificial intelligence is like being afraid of your shadow. The thing is that it's aggregated shadow of a collective. So it's a collective aggregated to something, but basically that's been happening all the time. We just call it society or organizations, but we are learning how they turn into super intelligence, but basically that's us. So there's like this strange switch. There needs to be a mind switch there. And the thing I'm trying to do with the NEON project, because that's like, we are using agent-based models to help accelerate the transition to renewable energy and mobility. But it is basically becoming more aware of the things that already exist. Like today, the grid already exists. Things are connected to it, and that all happens already. But it's being an active agent process. So that is super intelligence, but it's at the same time, it's us. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out ways to articulate it better, but one thing I try to do in the hive mind paper is dive a little bit deeper in the concept of social technology, and separate social technology in 3 types. It's something I only did in this paper. So I separated in tacit technology, explicit technology, and created technology. Yeah, Joshua.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you're taking the words right out of my mouth with what you're saying as far as when is humanity going to realize we are the artificial intelligence? And the more I hear you talk about the grids that already exist, it's like the DNA and the RNA. So the DNA is these ATCG, these four things, which is much like quaternary computing and quantum computing. But then there's junk DNA. And I feel like that's what we're filling up the grid with is all, no offense to Robert, he's doing a great job, but there's a giant marrow board and how it all links together. You know, it's junk DNA until you express it with the RNA and compile it and turn it into folded cells or microbiota. So once we realize that we are popping in and out of existence, maybe it's 100 years, maybe it's 120 years, maybe it's 40 years of life, but we come into existence as a child, we die, our cells deteriorate, and the memory lingers on in some sort of collective consciousness of who that person was. Everyone that dies is an angel and a wonderful person, but when they're alive, they're, you know, a piece of work. So I think please continue with that line of thinking, Mixel, as far as understanding that we are artificial intelligence, and that will help us not be afraid of ourselves. I think that's quite brilliantly said. And I just wanted to thank everyone. I got to jump back onto another call. And Robert, I look forward to talking to you soon. I have some stuff I would love to share with you. And Roland, thank you so much for telling us about what's going on with your interview with Tim Berners-Lee. That was very insightful. And I want to make tool libraries with you, Graziano. I just want to be, I'm all about those tool libraries. So thank you.
Nice seeing you're in another setting, Joshua. Bye.
It's a pleasure, Mixel. Thank you. And my friend Mickey Willis, he's an old client, not really a friend. I don't associate with him, but he's the only other digital shaman I know. So it's nice to meet another one. Cheers.
So, Mixel, you've been nominated the digital shaman. That's good, I think.
Yeah, I'm
Very
still
limited.
trying to figure out what it is, but
Well, you never find out. That's the point, isn't it?
Okay.
yeah, I talk with Alexander. I get quite some mixed reactions to it. Turns out a lot of people find Alexander pretty dangerous. I had fun with him.
Oops, I thought I was unmuted. I was going to say, I know you said you're getting tired, Mixel, but I'm curious. Well, there's this idea I've heard in, say, intelligence or maybe even consciousness or some of these things that they can maybe be substrate independent, but I'm curious what embodiment or re-embodiment looks like. What is the substrate of that embodiment? Is it the same we currently have, or it's something different?
If I'm hearing substrate independent, I'm thinking about brain plasticity. Like you can make a person see with his tongue in less than 20 minutes. It does require the person to have become blind and not being born blind, because there is this moment that we cognitize the world. But you can actually have this. It looks like a lolly to suck on, and it's a camera translating everything to your tongue, because your tongue is like the place where it's kind of the most dense space for sensory. So it's, if you look at your skin, not every place has as much feeling than other places, but your tongue is like hyper. So that's why they put it on the tongue. Because you could do it on your belly or your back as well, but there's not just enough sensory input there. And it takes 20 minutes for a blind person to catch a ball. There are some pretty nice videos online of blind people climbing with this kind of tool. And so that's brain plasticity, because if you talk to the person about the experience, he talks about the experience as if he is seeing, but he's seeing with his skin, with his tongue. So we wouldn't associate it with that. So I can understand that way it's independent, but then again, not fully, because language is another kind of, we're speaking English, but I speak Dutch, and there are so many other languages, and probably, I don't know, maybe language is also kind of a Turing complete. So you can just swap one language with another, but there's this funny thing that one language kind of aggregates a different culture than another language. There's this interesting mix, and I like to give the example of common sense. The English word common sense translates differently to, in Dutch, it's healthy sense. And in French, it's the right sense. And you just see that if you're talking that language, that subtle change creates a different flavor. So
yeah, it was rather different from a camera that's interpreting three-dimensional X, Y, Z and translating that. That's geometric. So you've got a high read-write integrity in that point. But language, sheesh, the word common. And common sense is very uncommon. You know, it's and English is famous for meaning so many things without getting them specific, you know, the variety. So how many dimensions are involved in some of these channels, or by comparison with the plasticity that you get with a visual mapping in the space, which is all we do anyway. I mean, this is all visually mapped. Why not take it through a camera under my tongue? Sure. And actually, it happened before I thought of it. Now, I heard it said once that the way to look at this is as though you're driving in the fog and all the information is in your rearview mirror.
yeah, that's a rear view mirror of McLuhan. Mistake.
Probably, yeah. It already happened.
He said some other. Yeah. He said some other interesting things, like the medium is a message, which kind of, and first we build our tools and then our tools build us. He had some interesting insights in the way the things work.
Another famous Canadian.
Canadian or comedian?
A Canadian. He wasn't a comedian. He was not a good stand-up at all. Had no timing.
Well, maybe you answered my follow-up question, because in some ways what you're pointing at earlier about, say, a lot of these externalized maybe issues with the world, if we could feel it, it would be quite different. We'd be responding to it. But so maybe your answer with the tongue lollipop thing is that the capacity of our bodies or brains or all of it together is so much more than we currently using it for, that our current body can embody that larger sort of digital, bring on that larger digital world as well. But I'm curious if that's also what you're sort of pointing at with some of what you said around sort of some scary things or some experiences that, yeah, I don't know, do we need to be augmented to embody that greater thing, or I don't know, your sense there?
Well, I always had a like extremely technological point of view, right? That like memory is of course stored in a tech, like in your brain, until you figure out that it's not. And that's so, but then it becomes a little bit more scary. So if you see the experience of what I like to call the meta brain, that's something that happened during a keynote in 2011. So basically, it is left brain, right brain activities at the scale of a large crowd, so 3,000 people. So 3,000 people watching a keynote, that's like left brain. Everyone is focused on the thing that is happening. But because they wanted to improve the experience for the keynote with so many people, they asked people to instantly Twitter any thoughts they had so that that could get moderated. But that means that at the same time, you had like wandering thoughts that were going everywhere. And some were interesting, others were not really interesting to you. But if you can then synchronize the two flows, because you could be in the flow of one, or you could be in the flow of the other. But synchronizing those two, that's like playing multivocal music. That's a difficulty one. But if you start doing that, the experience I had by reaching the flow of two asynchronous collective activities made my mind expand to the room. So I had the feeling that I was this 3,000 people. And I couldn't get away from that feeling. There was a feeling, nothing else than a feeling. But that's like 2011 that I start realizing like, what the hell is this? So that I like to, but digging more and more deeper into that, you can actually get into a point that you can actually do the same with the collective unconsciousness. But then the collective unconscious isn't conscious anymore because you're mediating it into a way of existing. And that's, I mean, I can imagine that people who experience that, like consciously experiencing consciousness without having all the training in cognition and science, they would experience it as a psychotic event. But if you want to stand strong in a storm like that, you could actually have the scaffolds to do it. And then it's not psychosis, it's something else. You start realizing that you're not like, the interesting thing about, I mean, I like the picture here actually. You see an iceberg. I think our ego and the way our brain work is a little bit like an iceberg, but basically the iceberg is also still water. So if you get into this mega hyper flow, you get so much energy into your eyes that your structures will melt away. And that means if your ego fully melts away, you hear that also as ego death and the things they do with psychedelics. But if you can do that superposed while still having all control, that's another game. And what I've noticed when that stuff was happening is that while I was still pretty well okay, people around me weren't okay. People around me start doing really crazy things. So what does it mean? It means that we are way more connected? I don't know. I mean, like for example, I'm gonna give a very concrete example, right? So I was in this meta hyper flow, like it felt like being drunk all the time. And I mean, I'm talking about weeks being drunk. But I noticed like when I was climbing in a situation like that, and my climbing partner kind of got like zoomed out and started giving 10 meters of rope. So that's a concrete event. I didn't imagine that happened. So when I hit the ground and all that stuff happened, and so I talked to my climbing partner like, what the hell? And he was more in shock than I was, because he just made me do a deadfall. So right, because I also still not sure how I survived that. I guess that probably there was enough friction on the rope, because it's I've been climbing all the way, so there's probably enough friction. I think it's probably on the rope.
Douglas Adams, you know, that if you want to fly, the thing you've got to not do is worry about hitting the ground. Just don't worry about hitting the ground, and you're fine. You know. So,
but you're accelerating, but you're connecting with all the other people around you, and they start accelerating with you, and you just pull them. So I really understand how that mass psychosis kind of triggers. It's like a wildfire.
Well, it's a bunch of people finding somebody else in their canoe. They're in their canoe, and all of a sudden something else is in here with them. They are part of something else. But
that's very scary for.
Oh, it's weird. It's definitely for. You know, remember those little steering wheels you could get for your co-driver, you know, with the kiddie wheels, you had a plastic stick-on wheel and the kid would sit there driving. Yeah, and matching the way the road works by their. Now, if our consciousness can be considered in that frame, that we're actually just rationalizing our experience as it happens. Then when there's a shift in the way that that's all mediated, bye Graziano, bye Grant, bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
If there's a shift in that, then it's definitely a shift. It's like athletes talk about getting in the zone, you know?
Exactly. It's exactly like runner's high.
Yeah.
But later on, I realized
it's beyond runner's high. Beyond that, I'm talking about the surfer who's in a very specific space at a very specific time. Yeah, super zone. Or basketball. They talk about a lot in basketball. There's also a lot of pro golfers who talked about just knowing what is happening, right?
But
and I read,
actually later on I discovered that some scientists also describe it. Sometimes in the preference, they talk about this moment that they feel connected and really understood it all. Yeah.
Have you read this at all? Is this book known to you guys? Oh, Kurt Vonnegut. This was. It's a Kurt Vonnegut book, Cat's Cradle. It was one of his first big ones that dealt basically with its nature of what is time, flow, consciousness, in the nature of all sorts of stuff. And I just hear the resonance here between this business of being in time or being of time, which I find quite common in literature. Ursula Le Guin particularly writes about the marriage of being with becoming. That at one level you're in a no time, this is now, and not labelable, and it just changed, you know, too late. The other one, you're dealing with a mentation, which is a projection of a future, a memory of a past. They're both hypothetical. So there's this balance between a hypothetical rationalization and an ever-changing moment, which is typically difficult if you're trying to steer backwards down a road, you know, that somebody else has already programmed you to follow, and you just don't quite, And I've come to the conclusion that actually consciousness is a consequence of process.
For me, it reminds me a bit like what would mean, you know, Hundertwasser, who builds like this building. Hundertwasser, he's an architect, and he was inspired by very organic development, and shows how you can actually nudge people in certain behavior. Mm-hmm. But it's like if you have like a certain landscape, you would actually go use the road with least resistance. So it's not like it's programmed already, but you can actually just decide. Okay, bye, Roland. Nice talking.
See,
you can.
It's not programmed. What I'm saying is that,
yes, but you can go upstream. It's like it's easier to go downstream, but as a Salam, you can actually go upstream. So it's not like it's fully determined, but you're probably you need a lot of energy if you want to go against it.
Vonnegut's model is basically that we're like spaghetti. You imagine spaghetti in 3 dimensions. If we were 2-dimensional beings, we'd be little circles, you know, my strand, your strand, we're on the same plane. And we see ourselves moving around because the spaghettis are tangled, and as you move the slice, you're seeing movement. And he says in the 4th dimension, this experience is just another piece of the spaghetti that is already there. Now, you can't move where you are because you are where you are. Do not think you can be anywhere other than where you are. That's useless. Nor can you change the velocity, because velocity is also a parameter in the space. But acceleration becomes accessible. David Snowden was saying the same sort of stuff the other day, you know. People keep trying to change where they are, and then make up stories or why it didn't go well. You know, because you got to rationalize on a regular basis. Because if you don't make sense of your world, you know. So everybody makes sense of the world and has good reasons for, a good understanding of, builds their model of sort of justification in those ways. But you've got to be in that meta space of modifying your acceleration, which is your target. What are you aiming for? Because aim, I think that's the creative object, is where the hell you're headed. If you don't have a heading, who's steering? What's the game? You know, this business of like, the bones translate faster than the nervous system. When people are walking, that their heel strikes the ground tells them more before the nerve information can reach the brain. But the impact on the top of the skull, you know, the atlas vertebra, you just get that, you know, so the reality is communicated, embodied before you even feel it.
Interesting. Huh?
Yeah.
But also, I really need to like wrap up, but it's been a great talk.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, you're good when you're loose. This is fun. I really enjoyed this, Michel. This is a real giggle.
Same.
Yeah.
I love this a lot. I mean,
well, I want to talk to you about this sort of thing.
Definitely, because
thing.
that's the. Oh well, okay. Why is it black? Why is them?
Well,
why are they all?
Well, I took off the trivial bits. The bit in the middle don't matter. They're two different puzzles. That's one of the things that Rubik did, was he put two puzzles together. A single puzzle is plenty. That's a fully Rubik's. You know, you can get confused.
Yeah, I love them. I like to play them.
Yeah, well, they're fun. They, you know, you learn about move and unmove. You know, like you've got to substitute and translate. You know, it's interesting stuff. Very interesting. And I really am. I'm going to take a good hard look at your paper. I'm going to spend some time on this because it's got so much in it, and I can feel.
Yeah, if there are things that you, I mean, this is.
There's lots in it that buzzies for me, but it's a new approach to a totally different approach than I'm used to, and into areas I've never thought of. So I'm really going to put some time on it. I have no idea whether I'll have anything to offer you at all. Can't promise you anything apart from that. I'm going to have a good look.
No, but if you can read it, it's good. So that would be fun.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of parts make sense in my head, but I'm not sure if it's going to make sense to other people. So that's going to be
very sensible stuff. Anyway. It's very sensible stuff, no doubt about that. Now, I'm wondering what you're sensing at. There's something about your steering.
Yeah, it's about the origin of life.
Yes, right. So where did that come from? So we got some thinking to do, I'm sure. Oh,
didn't I share you that? I mean, I'll share you it. It's so basically the research on multi-agents led to a concept of global brain, and the way I'm looking at it is that it is about the origin of life. And the interesting thing is that there actually was a documentary team. There was a documentary team Through the Wormhole with Morgan Freeman, and they have this session called this episode called "Where Does Life Begin?"
Okay.
And they go to all the usual suspects, and then they end up with the question: Is this it, or is there some other kind of life emerging? And that's how they come to the global brain. I'll share it to you. So it's only a 5-minute video, but it's fun that we have Morgan Freeman introducing our research group.
Yeah, I did check that one out. Yeah, it was fun. It was very nice.
Yeah. So, but the essence that I'm doing is that I'm doing applied science research on the origin of life by sticking into the present and understanding how in this very moment, in this very present, there is an origin of life emerging. And so I'm looking at living cities, living organizations. I'm definitely want to watch that video about a talk with your paper flight. That was a very interesting angle, because that would be it resonates.
I don't know that one.
No,
I
it
don't know
resonates
that
with
one.
the
That
idea
was
of
Josh's.
it resonates with the idea of the cognitive agents creating space-time, and the cognitive agents for, so that's the whole
I'd rather have it that way than the other, so I'm betting on that, you know. So
okay.
cognitive agents
But
rule.
I've noticed new people arriving, and I really need to go, so I'm just gonna say hi and then leave. Hi, Laura. Hi, Judith.
Apologies
Nice
for
meeting you.
being so late. So I missed most of what you've been doing this afternoon.
It's close to
Digital
midnight in Brussels.
shamanism.
I know.
Digital shamanism. The digital shamanism is about to leave the room.
Oh, well, then I'm really sorry I missed it, because shamanism is one of my subtopics. So we should connect separately about that.
We should all connect separately and otherwise. Yeah.
That's true. Or maybe we should just persist in this topic a bit for a few weeks.
Well, only connect, eh? You know,
Yeah.
you don't get the dots together, there ain't no life in it. Don't mean a thing if it ain't got swing.
It's about the road tower, right? It's about balance.
Sounds good.
I'm doing that applied to helping the energy grid in the Netherlands to transform. So apply to mobility and energy, and so I'm going to help that community now.
Patterns and mapping. It's all about patterns.
Well, I'd say it's about patterns and flow.
Without flow, what the hell's a pattern for?
Okay, point taken. But I'm more interested in the dynamics of the pattern than the pattern itself.
Yeah, the verb, not the noun. Who wants a noun? We've got plenty of nouns.
Yeah, okay. So much for my interjection of opinionated view.
No, please.
No,
Sorry, did I dish
I'm
you?
not feeling put down. I'm just saying it's a big topic. We could spend several weeks just on the flow of metacognition, and
Yeah.
perhaps that would be a lot of fun to do.
Had we but world enough and time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Lauren can take it to Kiko Lab with actually, how do you implement the flow? How do you create the right environment and embed that in the processes, which they're already to some extent doing. You look tired, Lauren. It's pretty late in Europe, isn't it?
See, I'm fairly convinced that the main issue is hygiene, keeping crap out of the machinery. You know, like, it's one of the first things I was sort of taught was Maslow is all very well, but if Hertzberg's got grit in the machinery, you're not going to realize, because everybody's going to be complaining about the parking lot or something like that. And the beauty of what Robert and Laurel and Charles do is they keep the grit out of the machine. That's about it. For me, that's a necessary component, because without that, you don't get the flow. You don't get the flow, no go.
Interestingly, today, Mixel asked if it's a pretty open call, and we had him tweet the Zoom room out. So we had our first Zoom bombers on this room today. It was, although I'm already well prepared for that. I forget how you just referred to it. The noise. I guess somebody came in and actually literally made a bunch of noise. But
a sound bomber.
So you were able to eject them rather quickly?
Yeah. I'm pretty familiar with how
He's
to
good in his
defend
fingers.
against Zoom bombers, though. I don't know. You never know until you give them a chance to sort of reveal that that's what they're here for.
I don't
And
understand the motivation for a Zoom bomber to be a Zoom bomber. I mean, I
Oh,
got more than enough Zoom to do without trying to find one that I want to do something devilish to.
you live in a different world, Judith.
There are people with time on their hands, Judy. Lots of time, clearly.
And anger. Anger.
I suppose, but it's just so unproductive. You know, I kind of want to grab each of them and say, find something else that's more useful to do. I mean,
I know. Whenever somebody
They
phones
have
me
their
and tells me that my
function, right?
Microsoft problem.
I really
Sorry.
see that they do have their function.
They're irritants. They're
well,
busy.
they may create additional cohesion in the group they're just attempting to disrupt, because groups tend to kind of
The
come
worthy
closer
times.
together to defend against a common enemy. So
They
they,
always irritate me because I get jealous because I feel like they have higher collective intelligence than we do and can organize better. It makes me feel so ashamed.
that's where the spot riots came from, huh?
Oh, I'd love Kikolab to be able to organize like that.
Ecolab is doing really well, Lauren. I mean,
Oh,
calls just keep getting bigger and longer. I mean,
yeah.
it's a little frightening, in fact, when it starts to be a group more like 30 or 40 people than a group like 12 or 20 people. And then instead of going routinely to a 4-hour meeting, it's going routinely to a 6 to 8 hour meeting. It's like, my God, that's a long time.
Uh,
But your calendar's too full for spin-off meetings.
I know.
And we certainly don't want to emulate organizations that fractalize all the time, and then you just end up with 6 meetings on the calendar instead of 1. And in total, they don't end up to 6 times the value of the 1. So
No. So, Robert, did Heidi put her foot down? Was she like, you need to trim your beard because you're looking like Wolfman Jack?
it's getting up there again, but yeah, she said a lot of our family photos were unusable. So not that we went and got professional ones, just sort of selfies and such. But
I will posit, though, that as I really like beards on men. I think, you know, I don't like them when they kind of look like the mountain man beard that comes down to mid-chest. That's not my preferred style of beard, but I think facial hair is a good thing. People can do whatever they want to do. Just my personal response is I'm always, it's just an extra level of complexity, because you look at the person and it's like, oh, nice. I wonder what they look like without, you know. It's kind of like, and I don't have the same reaction when I see someone with hair. Do I imagine them what they'd be like if they were bald? It's a different kind of thing. And so it's just, this is just, I don't know why I'm saying this. This is really stupid and self-disclosing, but it's just.
It's fun. It's interesting. It's interesting if you catch yourself in that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
I know even when I shaved it off, I looked quite different to myself, and even Heidi said, yeah, and maybe it's something also that it sort of extends the shape of the face. You almost look like you lose 40-50 pounds or something just by shaving your beard off.
Yeah,
Well,
when
and it turned out that my husband, somehow his lower jawline is not a very pugnacious one or something. I mean, he looks more forceful with a beard than without. And he's a very gentle man. So that was helpful in his academic institutional settings. I'm not sure that he would not even have noticed anything. But from my perspective, it seemed like he had a different presence that was, you know. And then one time we went to a social event that was some sort of crazy reunion of his medical school class. So this was all people 25 plus years later kind of thing. And I'm there. And at that point, we weren't yet married. We were just dating. And people didn't connect this man that was their classmate with this younger woman that was sitting alone at a table because he was over there doing something. And so I got to eavesdrop, and it was like, oh, Dick Pyle has turned into a really interesting looking man. You know, it was like, yeah, right on. But it was pretty funny. And,
Okay, it's nice to have met you all. I'm gonna sleep.
thank you, Mixel. And I do
Bye.
want to come back on the shamanism topic. So
So where are you?
make sure I get to
Brussels,
Where?
close to Brussels.
Oh, nice. I love Brussels.
Brussels is great.
Oh,
I really like Brussels. We had a corporate headquarter location there, and I got to go there pretty regularly. We also had a lab in Antwerp.
it's lovely. So lovely.
Oh, that's interesting, Judy. Then you may actually know the city I'm living in. It's called Mechelen,
Yeah.
and it's exactly between Brussels and Antwerp.
Do you speak French?
No, it's Dutch.
Okay.
But the thing you can count on from most Dutch people, I find, is that they're multilingual in at least 2 or 3 different languages, because it's like Dutch and German and English and maybe French, and maybe they had Latin and Greek as the foundation. It's just,
Well, I always like to joke that I know like 7 different languages, but no one speaks them because they are programming languages.
there's that too.
But it is that there is this linguistic expectation here.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to not have a very good relationship with language. So they would label me with dyslexia, but I actually think that it's very wrongly understood what it really is all about. But I don't have that comfortable relationship with language. Like I just shared my article and about the hive mind, but I mean, as an anecdote to wrap up with, when I was writing my PhD, I actually had to send my drafts to an editor before my advisor was willing to look at it. Because he really got like so frustrated with all the grammar mistakes I make, but he really loved the thing I was creating and doing. So he actually just got some funds and made me send it first to an editor before he wanted to read it. Oh well, everyone his talent,
Glad I
right?
got to meet you, and sorry that I missed the earlier part. I'll look forward to the recording when it's available and listen into the discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Mixel. Thank you, and sleep well.
And actually, Judy, because of how I've redone some of the recording and streaming, is the recording will be available pretty much immediately on YouTube afterwards. So
Oh, great.
no more.
Just make sure that I get the current link, because I'm bad at keeping track of links and bookmarks.
Yeah, I can just share the link.
I need to get my bookmarks organized and do some other things. I usually have to go back and find an old email from the same person that kicks me somewhere and hope that leads me where I want to go.
I can also share although it's, I don't know, I definitely haven't really developed Miro boarding into a practice. It's more just sort of
It's okay.
visuals of what's happening. So there's
That's
a bunch
fine.
of links there too. And
Well, Miro is one of the technologies I need to come up to speed on. I'm gonna have to learn it from people.
Yeah, well, because it's so open, rather than say like a Google Doc or something, you could take it in 20 different ways all at the same time instead of a sort of linear thing. I guess
Yeah, but that makes gives it more flexibility for creativity too. So I mean, it's the iterative Google process is pretty pedantic, really, kind of very binary.
You know, I've been wondering a bit about this, Robert. Like, I was looking at one of those action artists the other day, you know, as the speaking is going on, she's painting and graphics and whatever. And that's a feedback in the space which the audience can relate to while she's doing it, while it is happening, you know? And Miro is like doing that through a typewriter. You know, it's, you know, like an Etch-a-Sketch. Up 3, over here, put a dot, you know? That's not the same thing as taking a pen and doing that. And I think you're doing great stuff. I love it. But I see nobody else is sort of picking it up with it, turning it over, reflecting upon it, bouncing forward. As a sound canvas, as a you know, just a timeline of what's going on, I think it's great. And that will be very valuable later. One can go back and start mapping it through. But I think you should probably relax on making it intelligible and just make it exhaustive. Just, you know, grab every link that comes to you from that process as you browse around in the back, and just bang it and 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 keep on moving. Flag the points that make sense. Making them make sense is later.
Yeah, although I don't know
I think there's a value in understanding the dynamic of the flow in a situation, but then there's a harvesting of the flow with additional content. It could be a separate and discrete step, or we could in any given discussion say, well, here are the 6 things that we've kind of talked about. Do we want to pick one and go further with that one for right now, and maybe circle back in a week on one of the other ones? That would be a process that we could experiment with. I'm struggling a little bit with some organizations right now where I'm trying to assist them in different types of change and trying to figure out the catalytic steps that will help them start to do things differently. I'm paying a little more attention than I would normally, even to process that enables, like you point here, new ways of connecting the dots. In fact, I should just ask you guys, because I have a, I somehow realized I had an assignment I didn't know I had for a meeting this evening with an organization at a national level that's wanting to put more emphasis on diversity, equity, inclusion. And they've decided that they, in order to really make it inbound and effective or onboarded, we should have a diversity moment in each of the 1-hour meetings with the group of 15 people that are in the room. And so I get to create the first diversity moment. And I thought about it, and I decided that the best thing I could come up with was, as the very first thing, let's get to know the diversity of our own group. And I want to know from each of you one thing that you think no one in the room knows about you.
Oh.
And I think that will be really interesting, because most of us have worked, I'm new to the group. I'm not new to the organization, but I'm new to this particular committee, and I probably know 4 of the 20 people from previous committees or something. And this is a high energy scientific group, so they're very task oriented. So this is going to stretch them a little bit, I'm sure. And I think it will be just fascinating to see what people bring up, you know, and even the people that I know a little bit, they're going to have to dig a little deeper in order for Judy to not already know that about them. Or other people in the group who they know better. So I think it's just going to be a fun exercise, but it will help us understand the intrinsic diversity that we're not noticing in each other.
Yeah.
So does that seem like your expressions are fairly positive? Does that seem like
yeah. Yeah, I'd love to be a fly on the wall. Scary.
And if they ask, or between then and the next meeting, I have some other similar sorts of questions, you know, that could be used by other people if they need a prop, you know, like, what are you hoping to get out of this? Or what are you finding challenging? Or, and again, to go around the room, you know, what'll happen, of course, is that someone will say, I was going to say that, but that's okay. You know, if in fact what you're finding challenging is what someone else is finding challenging, that's good to know. So I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds stimulating. And,
Well, this is a group that deals with national science policy for the American Chemical Society, which is a large professional group. And they have subcommittees, some that deal with the executive office, some that deal with NSF, NIH, all these kinds of things. So it's very different than their normal work kind of thing. So I think it will be a lot of fun. So I feel like I should let Lauren go to sleep because I know what her day has probably been like, and she's usually up at something like 6 a.m. So being up from 6 a.m. to 3 a.m. does not leave enough hours in between for restoration and recuperation. But so much is exciting with Kiko Labs right now, Lauren. I'm really excited about what you're doing.
Oh, geez. We Charles and I talked to Vincent today. Oh my God, it is total insanity. That boy.
Well,
I-
Vincent is like the energy bunny. You know, he's just always moving, and it's like whatever he was doing yesterday, he's doing something different today, and tomorrow will be yet again different again, and it's a little explosive in my view.
I've never seen anything like it. Like the speed at which he builds things. Like I haven't never seen anyone more productive in my entire life. I don't even know how he does it.
Well, he's brilliant, and he's an engineer, and he puts the two things together, and he just gets a big charge out of building things. So he just does it, and he's so impatient without wanting to impose that on other people. He just does it. You know?
Oh my God, it's
Very
ridiculous.
overwhelming, though. I mean, the speed with which he incorporates the nugget of an idea into a full-blown executable system 48 hours later is like, well, what did you do? Not sleep for the next 2 days? You know, that's my reaction. I don't know.
I don't know how he finds the time. It's like it's truly ridiculous. Oh my God. Like
Well,
That's
I
the
think
latest.
it's all his personal time, isn't it, Lauren? It's not like he has millions of people where he can farm this out to his workers, does he?
no. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know. It's a mystery.
Well, he's definitely got an engineer's perspective of kind of just build it and see if it works, and then fix it if it doesn't. But he's not like into analyzing it to death before you build the prototype.
Yeah, I'm inspired by the way he builds things. It's just like jump in, you know, do it, get feedback, fix it, you know. Like I'm sure that, you know, whatever he builds is not structurally sound. You know, he's just using simple no-code tools, so I'm sure he'll have to go back and rebuild it. But it's just a fantastic way to build, just super light and fast, and you know, because people like most guys just build these entire systems and they don't want to test them. They're like, no. It's kind of like the holochain thing. Like, we need to build this complex system before anyone can, like, you know, try it. And it's just like, you know, who knows what it's going to be like.
He has 3M's had this internal system of make a little, sell a little. We never did anything full blown without making little versions of it. And you'd make a little in the lab, and then you'd make a little in the pilot plant, and then you'd fix what was wrong with the pilot plant, and then you'd make a little run in production, and then you'd test that and find out what was wrong with it. And you'd also find out whether anybody really wanted it and whether it was worth messing with any longer. And he seems to have applied that whole mentality to coding, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I've never worked with a developer who's like, oh, I've made something useful for your community. It's like, whoa, what? Really?
I was thinking about what you talked about, and I put this together. Do you think it would help? That's kind of who he is. It's really a remarkable trait.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So what did he do now?
Today he showed us some things he built with Trove, where you can basically, when you're searching around and you find, ooh, serendipity, you find some magical thing, It's like on your phone or something. You can save it for later, and it will remind you. You can just basically like a bookmarking function to, you know, tag something and, you
You
know,
have to fill it out later.
yeah.
Right. The
Actually,
Holy Grail.
It's Trove itself that reminds you, or some other system, or like where? How does the notification or reminder make its way to you?
Yeah, it's Trove.
Does that mean it's a mobile app, or it's a desk like?
I think
How do I
the
use?
anywhere app. I think you can do it on your phone or your tablet or your computer. I haven't really dug. I've been there, but I haven't tried to access it from multiple locations. I've done it from my tablet and my computer, just to comply with something he needed right then. You know, like my fast pages.
Actually, the last little while, I haven't actually. It's been quite a while since I joined, I guess, an OGM call, but YouTube recommends it and a bunch of other things to me, and sometimes I do watch and listen. So some of the, I guess I'm up on some of the recent threads in some ways. Actually, today I was just watching some of the. Didn't realize there was videos on Kiko Lab's YouTube channel, so I saw a piece not done yet. Some of your
The Kiko
interviews.
Lab channel is one of the best ones.
Yeah, well, yeah, I meant the sort of Sam Rose stuff. Some of the stuff that's public on YouTube, rather than, I guess, I'm assuming some of the stuff in the knowledge repository is a little more unlisted or whatever. But yeah, also some of the, is it generative commons stuff, and just hearing some of the thinking there. Yeah, I guess I likely heard Vincent speak more on some of those calls than other times in the past. But
Oh, Sam Rose is another one. My God. He's another heavyweight. Just incredible. I was on a
in your calls, Nolan. You've done a great job.
I was on a call with Sam Rose and Tiberius. It was just insane. It was like amazing. Yeah.
yeah, well, I know you said sort of maybe some of what Vincent's making will need to be redone, maybe if needed, if the point comes to need to say scale up or security wise. But I know Sam Rose is in terms of a developer, he's deep in that realm in terms of building software and technological systems.
Yeah.
That scale of things, or that sort of yeah.
It's kind of amazing to me that all of these really super developers know each other. It's kind of like an inner circle of developers, you know, the ones that they consider kind of their peers that they would actually call if they're trying to do something and it's not working how they want.
Yeah.
Sort of. I think also there's lots of developers that I forget this term where they call it like the rock star developers, or those that try and do it all on their own, and then the mentality often in some software projects is just to fork rather than collaborate sometimes. But, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, for me, the other person I put in that sort of magical box, although I haven't, it's actually been a while since I've contacted, is Connor Turland, who sort of, when I've played with him, he's also proficient enough with coding where it's just sort of like, well, rather than just talking about it, how about we just make it now and see how it works, this sort of thing. But yeah, yeah.
One of the first things they gave us in our business school thing was the time span of control. That there's some people you can say, mind that desk for the next hour, and they're okay with that. There's other people you can say, go to India and build an oil refinery, and that takes a little longer, you know. So there's the quality of that ranging you can give people, and coders often get lost somewhere up and down that place. You give them a little bit and they disappear to India to shave a yak or two, you know. They just, the world gets bigger all around them, and some of them are just very good at ding 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 ding, home, and then it deployed it. It's there. don't know how the pieces fit together.
Michael,
John,
did Charles tell you that we were talking to a lady from I think OFC, and she was so excited that we were doing stuff with you. She was like,
well,
Michael Linton, really?
you know, I'm not difficult to find. So, you know, yeah, thank you.
what's
And
OFC?
I open future collaboration, open future collaboration, our future collaboration, something like
OFC, whatever it is. It's
Open
yeah, .org.
Future Coalition, maybe?
Yeah, one of those. It was a co something or other.
Yeah.
It wasn't cooperative, I know that. But you know, it's yeah, they've got some good ideas. They'd be interested. I'll be checking in with them
She
before.
seems like she knows what she's talking about. You know, I've been in Kernel, and I talk to a lot of blockchain people, and I never know what the fuck they're doing. I'm always like, what?
The blockchain is, I mean, let's leave the blockchain in the corner for a while, you know, and get on with it. It's, you know.
But hers, but when she talked, I was like, oh, I understand the value. It was like so easy to understand, and also sort of, I don't know how to describe it. It's like most blockchain projects are super masculine, but hers was more feminine, and it was like about you know impact, and it's hard to describe, but the way that men put things together, it's always like fueled by charisma, and the way that she's designing, it's really like measuring impact is just so different than what you have to do to like raise money and stuff like that. It allows investors to invest based on your effectiveness and not your charisma, which to me is super attractive. And it to me that's like so much easier to do. To me it's just so like way easier to figure out how to be effective than to figure out how to be like, wow, I'm doing these amazing things. I don't know. I like what she's doing there.
what was her name, Lauren? Do you remember?
Caitlin. So Charles and I had a meeting with her in Jamaica, and Jamaica's also delightful. She's so cool.
She is cool.
Yeah, we never like really got to know her on the call with Jordan, but she was just great.
Yeah, I looked her up independently on the web and picked her up from some of the other frameworks she's involved with. But she's doing some really cool stuff. Deep thinking around values and framing values and finding coalition areas, and just she seems culturally deep in terms of her ability to discern the culture and help the organization see its own culture in part, and then helping the ones that are similar in culture to connect with each other a little bit.
I think I might have been like underestimating them a little bit, just because the MOU with
Follow through on that was a little loose for sure.
it's more like it just seemed like a fluff document. So I was just like, oh, they wanted to like build a better world. I was like, I have no idea what that means. But when I talked to her, it was just I didn't get that vibe at all. And from talking, I listened to the call last week from Jordan, and he seems like a deeper person than I imagined.
Yeah, he seems pretty deep to me too.
was this a Kiko? Oh, I guess Michael left. Is this a Kiko Lab thing, or which call are you talking about? Jamaica and Jordan and Caitlin. And I know I missed one of the weeks, unfortunately, on the cult stuff. I don't know if that was the one, but.
Judy, you want to explain?
Well, we've been working on this possible MOU between Lionsburg and OGM, and it evolved into a sort of a subset of people. Initially, Jerry and I and Pete were doing a lot of work on a document just to get it back to them. And then Jamaica had done a bunch of interviewing with us about the culture of OGM to help us build the culture into a framing of ourselves going forward. And the calls they're more structured than regular OGM calls. But they're very much influenced by whoever's in the room and whether or not we actually have an agenda for the call, and then whether we stick to the agenda even if we have an agenda. They occur on sort of after the regular weekly OGM call. There's a follow-on call that some of us go to with Lionsburg. And I don't think that closed calls, Lauren, from my perspective. Occasionally we get people there that aren't irregulars. There was some sensitivity initially when we were messing about with an MOU and what were the legal definitions of all of that and so forth, but we've kind of gotten away from that anyway to something a lot simpler.
Yeah, Lionsburg is offering fiscal sponsorship, which means that they have an entity, which is a nonprofit, tied with the for-profit that they're offering to people who don't have an incorporated body.
So sort of an umbrella under which a group like OGM, which does not have 501c3 status or C Corp substructure or things like that, which would be the money-making arm that can make money for the nonprofit because it's aligned with the goals of the nonprofit. That's what the C Corp would be. And they've just said that we can do it under the Lionsburg umbrella for subsets of OGM until such time as either the individual entity, whether it's Kiko Lab or some other, the Food Quest people or whomever, decide that they want to get their own 501c3 and move over to deciding just be themselves. In the meantime, they can take advantage of the 501c3 umbrella and solicitation of donations and stuff while they're getting started. They have to, of course, comply with the rules of being a 501c3 and tend to, all monies, they either don't make money because they're a nonprofit, or the monies they do make are aligned with their goal of the nonprofit so that it doesn't put anyone 501c3 status. But then as we started, Lionsburg put some money in, said that they would put tens of thousands of money available as matching monies in a fund, that then if somebody came along and said, well, I'd like to give OGM $1,000, it would become $2,000 because it would be matched by the money from the matching fund. And to some extent, there are other donors within OGM that are saying, well, I could put some money in that fund to make the bigger potential match available for other potential matches and so on.
So Charles got his nonprofit straightened out, and I'm wondering if we should host other people under do fiscal sponsorships, like for Mamadou, who's in Africa, and he can't
get to the one in the US very easily, probably.
Yeah, so he can't do a Kickstarter or anything because he's in Africa. They don't let people in Africa do that. And so it'd be nice since Kiko Lab is supposed to be an incubator to actually help a company in any way at all.
Well, and that might be part of, that's something you could do alone as Kiko Lab / Love Evolve, or it's something that you could do as Kiko Lab Love Evolve under Lionsburg if there's some reason to do that because you want access to the matching monies in Lionsburg. So that's kind of I think it gives us the opportunity to approach donors at different levels for what level they're willing to fund and whether or not they want to be the matcher or the matchee, so to speak.
Mhm. Mm.
And I have the sense that if we use up the money that's in Lionsburg, because we've raised sufficient money to use up the matching money that they've agreed to provide, that there's some folks ready to step in with round 2 or something like that.
Okay.
So that's my sense of how it's working. A lot of this you could find on the Stewards channel, Robert, in the CSC Agora. Some of these things are in one of the channels that is marked Stewards or something like that, which is
I
now
just,
being renamed anyway.
I just offered Jerry my wing woman services. I'm really good at that.
Sorry, I missed what services?
Jerry's kind of getting ready to pitch the idea of OGM to some of his friends. Made a lot of money in .com era and etc. And Jerry's really well connected actually. But he's not like the
Putting a succinct deck together is not exactly his forte.
yeah, he's not like the best self-promoter in the universe. Which is not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing.
No.
So what will you help him with then, Lauren?
No, I was just, I told him if he ever needed a wing woman to shamelessly promote him, I would be happy to. Sometimes we need that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the word I missed. Wing woman.
Wing woman.
It didn't
Yeah,
compute.
it sounded more like wing woman, and I thought, I don't know what that is. So. Wing woman, I understand. Well, we should let you go to bed, Lauren. It's getting prospectively later and later in the European community language. Going on 6 here, so well past midnight for sure.
Yeah, I need to go to bed.
It's only 5 hours between now and 6 a.m., so yeah, you should.
All right.
Great to see you. Great to see everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Actually, I got more things to turn off this time if we're done in general, because I'm just recording and streaming. So, 1 second.
Sounds great. Have a good week, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Michael.